Fleet Commander Rathon Sol Virak had conquered 4,000 worlds, and every single one of them was hanging around his neck. Small pendants, resin-sealed soil samples, one from each planet he had brought into the Dominion's embrace. They clinked against his chest plate when he walked, a quiet percussion that only he could hear. Other commanders collected medals. Rathon collected dirt. He stood at the observation deck of the Silent Calculus, flagship of the 9th Integration Armada, and watched the stars slide past like diamonds on black water. 1,200 warships trailed behind him in formation. Carrier class, planet crackers, enough firepower to boil a small sun, and all of it pointed at one small blue world in an unremarkable arm of an unremarkable galaxy. Earth. He had read it 11 times already, but reading it was better than thinking, and thinking was all there was to do out here between the stars. Class 2 pre-spaceflight civilization. Dominant species. Bipedal, carbon-based, warm-blooded. No energy shielding. No faster-than-light capability. No orbital defense platforms. Primary weapons operated on chemical combustion. They were still throwing controlled explosions at each other and calling it war. Projected integration time, 11 planetary rotations. Rathon closed the file and clicked his mandibles in what passed for a sigh among the Valith. 11 rotations. He had spent longer waiting for fuel resupply at border stations. This was not a campaign. This was paperwork with a view. He had volunteered for it. That was the part that made his thorax itch when he thought about it too long. 40 years of service, 40 years of fire and strategy, and the mathematics of breaking civilizations open like seed pods. And for his final act, he had raised his hand for the easiest target on the board. He told himself it was pragmatism. A clean final entry in his service record. A soft landing before retirement. He did not tell himself the truth, which was simpler and worse. He was tired. Tired in the way that no amount of sleep could fix. Tired in the way that 4,000 soil pendants can make a person tired. If that person has started to wonder whether dirt is all that remains of the worlds those pendants represent. Commander. Tactical Adept Yen stood in the doorway. Young. First campaign. Her chitin was still the bright amber of a fresh molt, and her compound eyes had that wide, unfocused shine that new officers carried before their first planetary drop burned it out of them. What is it, Adept? I have been reviewing the intercepted transmissions from the target world, their broadcast signals. And they are extensive, Commander. They broadcast constantly. Entertainment, information, music, personal communications. They have been leaking electromagnetic noise into space for over a century of their local time. Primitive species often do. They discover radio and treat the universe like an empty room they can shout into. Rathon turned back to the viewport. File your analysis and move on. Yen did not move on. She stood there, her forelimbs clicking in the way junior officers clicked when they wanted to say something that might get them yelled at. Speak, Adept. Some of their art transmissions are unsettling. Rathon looked at her. Unsettling, not in content, in frequency. There are harmonic patterns embedded in their music and visual media that do not correspond to any known artistic tradition in the Dominion archives. They are mathematically complex in ways that a Class 2 species should not be capable of producing. File it. But there is something else. She stepped forward and projected a data cluster from her wrist console. Numbers, wave patterns, a comparison chart. During the deep geological scan of the planet, the survey team flagged an anomalous resonance signature beneath the ocean floors. It was classified as tectonic activity and dismissed. As it should have been. The frequency of that tectonic activity is identical to the harmonic pattern I found in their children's music. Silence. the kind that has weight. Rethon studied the data. His mandibles worked slowly, grinding against each other the way they did when he was processing something that did not fit into the neat boxes his career had built for the universe. Coincidence, he said. Geological resonance bleeds into surface culture all the time. They hear the planet hum, and they hum back. It is a documented phenomenon in at least 12 integrated worlds. Yes, Commander. Flag it for the xenogeology team if it makes you feel thorough. And get some rest, Adept. The drop is in 6 cycles, and I need you sharp, not chasing ghost frequencies. Yen saluted, forelimbs crossed, head dipped, and left. Rethon stood alone. He pulled up the comparison chart again, stared at it. The oceanic resonance and the children's song overlaid. 2 wave patterns, identical. Perfect mirror images of each other, and both far too complex to be natural phenomena. He closed the display. He did not sleep that cycle. He told himself it was pre-deployment restlessness, the kind every commander felt before a new world, and he almost believed it. But his hands kept drifting to the soil pendants on his chest, counting them in the dark like prayer beads. 4,000 worlds, 4,000 victories. Not one of them had ever sung to him before he arrived. The fleet crossed Mars orbit at 0400 ship time. Rethon was on the command deck, surrounded by the quiet efficiency of a Valith bridge crew preparing for integration. Screens flickered with trajectory data. Communications officers confirmed signal silence from the target. Weapons systems hummed at standby. Earth filled the forward viewport. Blue, green, white. Swirled with clouds like creams stirred into something dark. The oceans caught the light of the local star and threw it back, and for a moment the whole planet looked like it was made of light, rather than rock and water. Rethon had seen 4,000 worlds from orbit. Gas giants with storms the size of continents. Ice planets that glittered like broken glass. Volcanic worlds that glowed red and angry, as if the planet itself was trying to fight back before the ships even arrived. None of them had looked like this. He opened his private log, added a single notation. One word he had not used in 4 decades of service. One word that had no place in a military file. One word that sat there on the screen like a confession he had not meant to make. Beautiful. He closed the log, straightened his thorax, clicked his mandibles twice, the Valith equivalent of clearing one's throat. All ships, he said. Begin descent formation. Integration Protocol 7. Standard deployment. 1,200 warships shifted like a flock of metal birds, angling toward the blue world below. Rethon touched the newest pendant on his chest. Empty resin, waiting for soil. He wondered, briefly, what Earth's dirt would feel like. The electromagnetic pulse hit Earth like a silent hammer. Every satellite died. Every communication tower went dark. Every screen on every continent flickered once, showed static, and then showed nothing. From orbit, the planet's night side went from a web of golden city lights to absolute black in 4 seconds. It was like watching a living thing close its eyes. Rethon watched the tactical display and felt nothing. This was the part of integration that required no thought. EMP, then kinetic strikes on military infrastructure, then broadcast of surrender terms. He had done it so many times that the steps had lost their meaning, the way a word repeated too often becomes just a sound. EMP deployment confirmed, the communications officer reported. Target civilization is dark. Kinetic package. 14 military installations across the planet. Command centers, launch facilities, hardened bunkers that the humans probably thought were secret. The Valith had mapped them in the first scan, weeks ago. They were obvious. Everything about this species was obvious. The kinetic rods fell, bright streaks in the atmosphere, like the planet was being stitched with needles of light. 14 impacts. 14 confirmed detonations. Plumes of dust rising through the cloud cover like gray flowers blooming in fast forward. All targets neutralized, Commander. Rethan nodded. Broadcast surrender terms. All major languages. Standard offer. Lay down arms. Submit to integration census, and the civilian population will be preserved. The bridge hummed with routine. Officers murmured data to each other. Screens refreshed. Everything was textbook. Everything was exactly as projected. Except, Rethan leaned forward. Communications. Report on ground-level intercepts. The officer hesitated. We are picking up analog transmissions, Commander. Hardened military channels and civilian shortwave radio. The EMP did not reach these systems. Expected. What are they saying? Another hesitation. The officer's compound eyes flickered in the way they did when data did not match training. They are afraid, Commander. That is consistent with all integration models. But there is a phrase being repeated across unconnected populations. Civilian and military, multiple continents, multiple languages. What phrase? The officer put it on the main display. Raw audio, translated by the ship's language matrix. Dozens of voices, overlapping, all saying the same two words in their own tongue. Not again. The bridge went quiet, not silent. The machine still hummed, the displays still flickered, but the Valeth officers stopped talking. They felt it too. The wrongness of it. Rethon stared at the words on the display. And completely impossible. Not again meant there had been a before. Not again meant memory, experience. A species that had never been contacted by a spacefaring civilization should not have a collective response that implied prior invasion. Their file said nothing. No prior contact. No evidence of previous extraterrestrial engagement. He queried the Dominion archive. Earth. Prior contact. History. Nothing. He queried deeper. Classified tiers. Strategic intelligence. Sealed records. Access denied. His mandibles ground together. He filed it. There would be time to investigate after the integration was complete. There was always time after. Commander. Yen's voice, tight and controlled. The oceanic resonance signature has changed. Explain. It was dormant during our approach, stable, background level. Since the EMP detonation, it has become active. It is pulsing. She put the data on her console. A waveform, steady, rhythmic, rising and falling in a pattern that Rethan's brain wanted to call breathing, even though that was absurd. Planets did not breathe. Rate of pulse. Accelerating, slowly. It has increased 4% since EMP deployment. Source depth. Approximately 11 kilometers below the ocean floor. Consistent across all ocean basins. Commander, it is not coming from one location. It is coming from everywhere beneath the water. The entire ocean floor is resonating as a single unit. Rethan looked at the tactical display. Blue planet. White clouds. His 1,200 ships in neat formation above it. Everything in order. Everything under control. Continue monitoring. Flag any further changes. Yes, Commander. He turned to the ground deployment officer. Launch the dropships. 200,000 units, 6 continental zones, standard suppression grid. The dropships fell like metal rain. 200,000 Valeth soldiers in full combat chassis, descending through Earth's atmosphere in armored pods that punched through the cloud layer and split open above the landing zones. 6 continents. Coordinated. Precise. The tactical display showed green lights across the board. Clean drops. Minimal wind disruption. Boots on alien soil. Rethon allowed himself a small satisfaction. Whatever the humans meant by not again, whatever the ocean was doing, it did not matter. The ground was taken. The sky was held. The mathematics of this were settled. His console chimed. Ground Team Pacific 7 requesting visual confirmation relay. He opened the channel. The feed showed a coastline. Rocky. Gray. waves rolling in with the steady patience of water that has been doing the same thing for 1 billion years. The Veilith ground team was establishing a perimeter, their combat units fanning out across the beach in standard formation. Then the team leader pointed his visual sensor at the ocean. The water was rising, not a wave, not a tide. The entire surface of the ocean was lifting upward as if something beneath it was standing up. And in the rising water, a shape, dark, geometric, vast beyond the ability of the camera to frame. The feed cut. Rathan's thorax went cold. Pacific 7, report. Static. Atlantic 2, report. Static. Continental teams, all channels, report. One by one, the ground teams answered, not with words, with the same visual. Every coastal team on every continent was looking at the same thing. The ocean was rising, dark shapes in the water, geometry where there should be waves. The feeds cut, one after another, each feed lasting exactly 4.7 seconds longer than the last, as if something was moving around the planet, reaching each team in sequence, at a speed that should not have been possible for anything that existed in physical space. 11 feeds, 11 cuts, perfectly timed, perfectly spaced, then silence. Rathan stood at the command console. His hands were flat on the surface. He was aware that his mandibles had stopped moving, that his compound eyes were locked on the tactical display, that every officer on the bridge was looking at him, and waiting for him to say a word that would make this make sense. He said nothing, because the tactical display was showing him something that did not make sense, could not make sense, and no word in any language was going to change what he was seeing. The planet's silhouette was wrong. The coastlines, the shapes of the continents, the boundaries between land and water that had been mapped and confirmed and verified by 3 separate survey teams, had changed. The water had not moved. The land had. Something beneath the surface had shifted, rearranged, as if the planet's crust was a skin, and something underneath had rolled over in its sleep. Yen was standing beside him. He did not know when she had moved there. She was looking at the same display. "The resonance pulse," she said. Her voice was very quiet. It stopped accelerating. "What is it doing now?" "It is steady, constant, like a heartbeat at rest." Rathan looked at the planet on the screen. Blue and green and white, changed and unchanged, beautiful and wrong. Something down there was awake, and it knew they were here. It came out of the ocean floor like a thought rising to the surface of a mind. Not fast, not slow, at the exact speed that made it impossible to look away. Rathan stood on the command deck and watched through every sensor the silent calculus possessed. Visual, thermal, electromagnetic, gravitational. He watched through all of them, and none of them agreed with each other, which meant either every sensor on his flagship was broken, or the thing coming out of Earth did not follow the same rules as everything else in the universe. The structures rose from the ocean trenches first, then from the fault lines, then from places that were not trenches or fault lines at all, places where the planet's crust simply opened like a door, politely, as if it had been designed to do this, and had merely been waiting for a reason. They were black, not the black of metal or stone or shadow, but the black of a place where light went and did not come back. They were geometric, angles and planes and edges that connected in ways that made Rathan's compound eyes ache. Veilith eyes were built to process complex visual data. They could track 1,000 moving objects simultaneously. They could not process this. The angles were wrong, not wrong like a mistake, wrong like a language he did not speak. "What am I looking at?" he said. He said it to no one. He said it to the universe, which did not answer. Yen answered instead. "Unknown, Commander. The structures do not match any cataloged xeno-architectural or geological formation in the Dominion database. They do not match anything. Size? The largest structure currently visible is approximately 400 kilometers along its longest axis. They are still rising. 400 kilometers. His flagship was 2 kilometers long, and it was the largest warship in the Dominion fleet. He was looking at something 200 times the size of his ship, and it was still growing, and it was one of dozens. "Ground troops," he said. "Status." The tactical officer's voice was thin. "Unit count is declining, Commander." "Declining how? Are they under fire?" "No, Commander. There is no weapons fire detected. No energy discharge. No kinetic impact. No thermal event. The units are simply, the count is dropping. I have no explanation." Rethon pulled up the ground sensor data. Each Valith soldier wore a combat chassis that transmitted biometric and positional data in real time. He could see them on the display. 200,000 green dots scattered across 6 continents. The dots were disappearing. Not blinking out, not moving off screen, fading, as if something was erasing them gently, carefully, one molecule at a time. And in the space where each dot had been, there was nothing. No debris, no heat signature, no residue. The soldiers were not being killed. They were being undone. Rate of loss? His voice was steady. His hands were not. Approximately 18,000 units per minute, Commander. 11 minutes. In 11 minutes, he would have no ground forces on Earth. 200,000 soldiers, gone without a single shot fired, without a single scream on the comms channels. Just silence and fading green dots, and the mathematical certainty that he was watching something he had no framework to understand. He did not order a retreat. There was nothing left to retreat. The structures stopped rising when they reached the upper atmosphere. They hung there, massive, black, geometric, impossible. And then they began to move. Not upward, sideways, toward each other. They connected, edge to edge, plane to plane, angle to angle, assembling themselves into a pattern that wrapped around the planet like a shell. From orbit, Earth no longer looked blue and green and white. It looked like a dark jewel, a puzzle box, a cage made of mathematics that predated mathematics. And then it spoke. Not in words, in frequency. The resonance pulse that Yen had tracked, the one that matched the children's song, the one that had been breathing in the ocean floor, it broadcast. Not through radio waves or light, or any medium the Valith used for communication. It simply appeared inside the navigation systems of every ship in the fleet, bypassing encryption, bypassing firewalls, bypassing the fundamental architecture of Valith computer systems, as if those systems were open doors in an empty house. The children's song, played once, soft, a melody that had no business being gentle, given what had just happened. And then silence. 1,200 warships hung in orbit around a planet that was no longer a planet. It was a shell, a structure, something that had been sleeping inside a world and had woken up because Rathan Solvirak had knocked on the door with an electromagnetic pulse and 200,000 soldiers. "Commander," Yen was at her station. Her voice was controlled in the way that very frightened people sound when they are using every part of their training to not scream. "I have a hypothesis." "Speak." "The structures are not weapons. They are not a defense system in any tactical sense. They are a framework, a guardian architecture. I believe they have been inside the planet for a very long time, possibly longer than the current geological age." "Guarding what? The humans?" "Guarding the humans, or containing them. I cannot determine which. The relationship between the native species and the structures is unclear. But the humans are not the primary intelligence on this planet, Commander. They never were." Rethan stared at the dark jewel that had been Earth. "All ships hold position," he said. "Arm all capital weapons. Full war footing." He had 1,200 warships. He had never lost. He walked to his private terminal and did something he had never done in 40 years of service. He entered his commander override code, a sequence that existed for one purpose only, and using it was a career-ending act, and accessed the classified tier of the Dominion Archive, the level above top secret, the level that fleet commanders were told existed but were never expected to touch. He searched for Earth. The file was not empty. It was sealed. The seal carried a timestamp so old that the dating system had to convert it 3 times before rendering a number his console could display. The seal predated the Veileth Dominion. It predated the civilization that had founded the Dominion. It predated the civilization before that. He broke the seal. Inside was a single entry. One line, written in a language that the translation matrix struggled with, rendering it in broken, archaic Veileth that read like a warning carved into the wall of a tomb. Claimed, "Do not approach. Do not wake the architecture." The entry was filed by a species called the Sethrani. Rethon knew the name. Every Dominion officer knew it. The Sethrani were the first civilization the Dominion had ever conquered. 6,000 years ago, at the very beginning of the Empire's expansion, opened their borders, handed over their worlds, and submitted to integration with a speed that historians had always called mysterious and unexplained. Rethan understood now. The Sethrani had not surrendered to the Dominion because they were weak. They had surrendered because they were running from this region of space, running from whatever was sleeping inside the blue planet in the unremarkable arm of the unremarkable galaxy. And the fastest way to get far away from Earth was to let someone else's empire carry you. He closed the file. He stood in the dim light of his private terminal and touched the soil pendants on his thorax, counted them. 4,000 worlds, 4,000 victories. He had built a career on the certainty that the Veileth Dominion was the apex of galactic civilization, that they conquered because they were strong, that the worlds they took were taken because no one could stop them. He counted the pendants again. He wondered for the first time how many of those 4,000 worlds were simply places that nothing else wanted. Ordinary dirt, ordinary rock, ordinary planets with ordinary species that had no guardian architecture sleeping in their bones. He wondered if the Dominion had spent 6,000 years conquering the galaxy's leftovers and calling it an empire. The thought sat in his chest like a stone, and he let it sit there, because there was nowhere to put it down. Rethan gave the order because he did not know what else to do. And a commander who does nothing is not a commander at all. All ships, full bombardment, target the lattice structures, fire everything. 1,200 warships opened up at once. The sky between the fleet and the planet became white. Pure, blinding, absolute white. The color of energy so dense that photons stacked on top of each other and forgot how to be light. Plasma lances, graviton beams, kinetic accelerators firing tungsten slugs at a quarter of light speed, antimatter torpedoes that carried enough destructive force in each warhead to crack a moon in half. Everything, every weapon in the most powerful armada the Veileth Dominion had ever assembled, firing simultaneously at a target that filled the sky. The lattice absorbed it, not deflected, not scattered, not reflected. The energy hit the dark geometric shell around Earth and ceased to exist. The instruments did not register an impact. They did not register a transfer of energy. They registered nothing, as if the weapons had fired into a hole in the universe where the concept of cause and effect had been quietly removed. Impact assessment, Rethon said. No impact detected, Commander. Clarify. The energy is gone, Commander. It did not reach the target. It did not disperse. Our instruments show that it simply stopped being. I have no further clarification to offer. Rethon's mandibles clicked twice. He had expected this. not the specific outcome. He had no model for a defense system that ate energy the way soil absorbed rain, but the general shape of it. He had known from the moment the ground troops disappeared that his weapons would not work. He had fired them anyway, because the alternative was standing still, and thinking meant following the logic chain to its end. And at the end of that chain was a truth he was not ready to hold. The lattice responded. It did not fire back. It did not deploy weapons. It rearranged. The massive black structures that formed the shell around Earth shifted, edges rotating, planes folding, angles reconfiguring into a new pattern. The movement was slow, deliberate, the way someone rearranges furniture in a room they own. And every Valith crew member who was looking at the new configuration through their visual sensors experienced the same thing at the same moment. A memory, not their own. Rethon was on the command deck, and then he was not. He was underground, small. His chitin was soft and new, and the world was dark and warm and pressed close around him. The nursery tunnels of his homeworld. The first place he had ever been. The smell of wet soil, and the sound of other hatchlings breathing, and the absolute, total safety of being too small to matter. It lasted 3 seconds. Then he was back on the bridge, gripping the console, his hearts hammering in a rhythm that did not match the rhythm they were supposed to keep. Around him, every officer was doing the same thing, gripping their stations, staring at nothing, breathing too fast. Each of them had been somewhere else for 3 seconds. Each of them had been small. "What?" said the weapons officer, and then could not finish the sentence. "The lattice is not communicating," Yenny said. Her voice shook. "It is not broadcasting a signal. It is interfacing directly with our neural architecture. It showed us something. Something personal. Something from before we had language." "It showed us childhood," Rethon said. "It showed us what it feels like to be small and safe and unimportant." The first ship came apart 7 seconds later. The burning Theorem, a heavy cruiser on the fleet's starboard flank. Rethon watched it on the tactical display. The ship did not explode. It did not break. It disassembled. Hull plating separated from the frame, not torn, not blasted, but unfastened, as if every molecular bond in the ship's structure had been individually and politely dissolved. The atmosphere did not rush outward in a violent decompression. It drifted, calmly, like smoke leaving a room through an open window. The crew, 4,000 Valith, were visible for a moment, floating in the gap where their ship had been, and then they were not visible anymore. Not because they died, because they came apart the same way the ship did. Gently, completely, without violence. Rethon watched. He did not look away. A commander who looks away is not a commander. The second ship disassembled. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each one took exactly the same amount of time. 19 seconds from first hull separation to final dissolution. The lattice was not hurrying. It was not angry. It was processing them with the careful, unhurried attention of a child taking apart a toy to see how it worked. "It is cataloging us," Yenny said. She was watching the data streams. Her hands moved across her console with a precision that did not match the terror in her eyes. "Each ship is being analyzed as it is disassembled. The lattice is learning our technology, our biology, our molecular structure. It is taking us apart to understand what we are." 1,200, 800, 400. The numbers fell on the tactical display like a countdown in a language Rethon was only now learning to read. Each number was a ship. Each crew was a collection of lives that had families and histories and soil pendants of their own. And they were being erased with the same gentle efficiency that a tide uses to erase footprints on a beach. 100. 50. Yen's console dissolved. It happened mid-sentence. She was speaking, something about energy patterns, something about data, and the console simply came apart under her hands. The molecules separated. The screen went dark. The frame lost its shape and became dust, and then became nothing. She looked at Rethon. Her eyes were wide and amber and full of something that was not fear. It was recognition. The look of someone who has just understood a joke that everyone else is still working out. "The song," she said. "It is a lullaby. It was always a lullaby. They were asleep, Commander. We woke them up." The dissolution reached her hands. Her fingers lost their edges. Her chitin softened and blurred, and became a color that Rethon's eyes could not name. Then she was gone. Rethon stood alone on the bridge of the silent calculus, the last ship. Around him, every station was empty. Every console was dark except his. The ship was intact. The lattice had taken everything else, every other ship, every other life, and left him, not by accident. The lattice had left his ship for last because it wanted him to watch, not as punishment, not as cruelty. The way you let a child see a flame up close so they learn what fire means before they touch it. He was the lesson. He stood there for a long time. The tactical display showed nothing, no fleet, no ground troops, no signals, just his ship. One green dot in a field of empty black, orbiting a dark jewel that had been a planet. He reached up and unclasped the soil pendants from his thorax. 4,000 small resin capsules containing the dirt of 4,000 conquered worlds. He set them on the command console in a pile. They made a small sound like teeth clicking together. He sat down in the commander's chair. He waited. The lattice rearranged one final time. The dark structure shifted. A gap opened in the shell, ship-sized, precisely shaped, pointed away from Earth toward open space. It was not a weapons port. It was not a trap. It was a door, open, waiting, pointed toward home. He was being released. Not forgiven, not spared. Released the way you release a small animal that wandered into your house. Gently, firmly, with the clear understanding that it should not come back. Rethon looked at the door in the lattice. He looked at the pile of soil pendants on his console. He looked at his hands, still whole, still solid, still his. He took the controls. He flew toward the door. Behind him, the pile of dirt from 4,000 worlds sat on the console of an empty bridge, and not one pendant was labeled. And he had never noticed that before, and it was the worst thing he had ever learned about himself. The gap closed behind him, and Earth came back. He watched it on the rear sensors as the lattice folded in on itself, the dark structures sinking back into the ocean floors, and fault lines, and secret doors in the planet's crust. And within minutes, the planet was just a planet again. Blue and green and white. Quiet. Ordinary. As if 1,200 warships and 200,000 soldiers had never existed. As if Rethon Solvarak had dreamed the whole thing in a bad sleep and woken up alone in the dark. He checked the ship's databanks. Empty. Not corrupted, not damaged, cleaned. Every scan, every sensor log, every tactical recording, every communication file, gone. Wiped with a precision that was itself a message. The lattice had reached into his ship's memory and removed everything that could be measured, analyzed, or replicated. Every piece of data that could tell the Dominion what the architecture was, how it worked, what it was made of. His personal log remained. He opened it, read through the entries. The lattice had edited those too, but differently. Every tactical observation was gone. Every scientific notation. Every measurement and analysis and strategic assessment. What remained were the entries he had written in the margins. The personal ones. The ones that began with feelings instead of numbers. The stars are too quiet here. Yen asked about the music again. I do not know why it bothers me that she is curious. Beautiful. The lattice had let him keep his emotions. It had stripped away everything he knew and left everything he felt. He understood, or he began to understand. The architecture did not care about the Valith Dominion's military capabilities. It did not care about their weapons, or their ships, or their empire. Those things were irrelevant. Toys that a child had brought into a room where adults were sleeping. The architecture cared about what Rathan had felt when he saw Earth from orbit. It cared about the word beautiful in a military log. It cared about the small, useless, unmeasurable thing inside a conqueror that still knew how to be moved by something he intended to destroy. That was what it let him keep. That was the lesson. The journey home took 3 weeks. The silent calculus was built for a crew of 800. Rathan flew it alone. The ship's automated systems handled navigation and life support. But everything else, the empty corridors, the unmanned stations, the mess hall with its 800 trays stacked and waiting, was silence. He did not eat on the normal schedule. He ate when he remembered to eat, which was not often. He slept in the commander's chair, because his quarters felt too much like a room, waiting for a conversation that was never going to happen. He replayed Yen's last words in his head, until they stopped being words and became a rhythm, a heartbeat, a pulse. It is a lullaby. He had led her to that planet. First campaign, bright amber chitin and wide compound eyes. He had led her there, and the architecture had taken her apart, molecule by molecule, gently, the way it took apart everything, and the last thing she did was solve the puzzle. Not scream, not run, solve. He wondered if that was why it took her gently. Because she understood. He did not think about this directly. He thought about the mess hall trays. He thought about the empty corridors. He thought about the soil pendants he had left on the bridge console. 4,000 capsules of stolen dirt, unlabeled, anonymous, and he had carried them for decades without noticing that he could not tell one conquered world from another by its soil. He arrived at the Dominion capital on a Tuesday by the local calendar. The silent calculus entered the orbital docking ring and was met by a security escort that did not know what to do with a single flagship returning without a fleet. They scanned the ship, found nothing, no damage, no crew, no data. Just one old commander sitting in a chair on an empty bridge. The high calculus convened within hours. The ruling council of the Valith Dominion, 12 senior commanders, and 3 theological mathematicians who interpreted the will of the calculus, the quasi-religious framework that governed Valith civilization. They sat in a half-circle of polished stone seats, in a chamber designed to make the person standing before them feel small. Rathan stood before them and did not feel small. He had already learned what small felt like. 3 seconds of nursery tunnels and soft chitin, and it had nothing to do with this room. "Your report, Commander," the first calculator said. Rathan had prepared 3 sentences. He delivered them without inflection. Earth is claimed. The claim predates all known civilizations. I recommend permanent exclusion from the integration register. Silence. "And the fleet?" the first calculator asked. "Gone. 1,200 warships. Gone. 200,000 ground troops. Gone. And you have no data, no sensor logs, no evidence of any kind." "None." The council looked at him the way organisms look at something that has stopped making sense. A number that did not resolve. They accused him of cowardice first, then fabrication, then psychological compromise. A fleet commander who loses 1,200 ships and returns alone with no evidence and a 3-sentence report is not a credible witness. He is a problem to be solved. They scheduled a second fleet, larger, better armed. They would send it within the year. Rathan did not argue. He did not warn them. He did not stand in front of the council and plead for them to listen, because he understood something that the council did not. Warning was not his to give. The architecture had let him live, It had let him keep his feelings. It had pointed him toward home and opened a door. It had not asked him for anything at all. It had simply shown him a fire and trusted him to remember what burning looked like. Whatever the Second Fleet found at Earth was the Second Fleet's lesson to learn. He asked for one thing: permission to retire. It was granted immediately. They were glad to be rid of him. He was stripped of rank, stripped of honors, struck from the record of active service. 40 years of conquest, reduced to a sealed file, and a pension that arrived in his account without a name attached to it. He chose a colony world, a quiet one, agricultural, far from the capital, far from the fleet corridors, far from anything that mattered in the mathematics of empire. He bought a small plot of land on the outskirts of a settlement that had no strategic value to anyone. He planted a garden, not for food, not for science. He planted things and watched them grow and put his hands in the dirt every morning, because the dirt was alive and warm, and it did not need to be sealed in resin and hung around his neck to mean something. Years passed. The Second Fleet was sent. The Second Fleet did not return. A third was discussed and quietly abandoned. Earth was removed from the integration register. The file was sealed. The word spread through the Dominion in the way that forbidden knowledge always spreads, in whispers, in rumors, in the spaces between official reports. A planet that could not be taken. A place where something old was sleeping. A blue world in an unremarkable arm of the galaxy that the greatest military power in known space had learned to walk around. Rethon heard the rumors. He did not comment on them. He tended his garden. One night, late, the colony's twin moons high and pale, his personal console chimed. An incoming transmission. No origin signature. No routing data. No sender identification. He opened it. 2 audio files. The first was the children's lullaby from Earth. The same melody that had played through his navigation systems. The same song that Yen had found in the broadcast signals. Soft, simple, the kind of melody that exists to make small things feel safe. The second was a Valith nursery song. He had not heard it since he was a hatchling, since the dark tunnels and the warm soil and the sound of other small bodies breathing in the dark. It was the first music he had ever known, and he had forgotten it the way adults forget the things that shaped them, completely, until the shape was shown to them again. He played both files simultaneously. The frequencies were identical. Different melodies, different worlds, different species separated by thousands of light years and millions of years of evolution. And underneath it all, the same frequency, the same mathematical heartbeat, pulsing beneath 2 lullabies that had no business being connected. The transmission ended. Rethon sat in the dark for a long time. He thought about Yen saying, "It is a lullaby." He thought about the sealed file that said, "Do not wake the architecture." He thought about the Sethrani, running from this corner of the galaxy 6,000 years ago. He thought about his soil pendants, unlabeled, interchangeable, 4,000 worlds, reduced to identical dirt. He thought about something very large and very old, sleeping beneath the surface of planets, singing to the small things that lived above. He did not know if the architecture was on every world. He did not know if it was beneath his garden, beneath this colony, beneath the Valith homeworld itself. He did not know if the Dominion's entire empire was built on the back of something that simply had not bothered to wake up yet. He did not know. He went outside. The garden was silver in the moonlight. The soil was dark and cool. The plants he had grown were small and ordinary and alive, and they did not care who he was or what he had done or how many worlds he had reduced to pendants. Rethon knelt. He put his hands in the dirt. For the first time in his life, he did not take a sample. He did not collect. He did not seal. He did not conquer. even in the small way that putting a world's soil in a resin pendant is a kind of conquest. A way of saying, I was here, I took this, this is mine. He just held it. The dirt was warm. Somewhere, impossibly far away and impossibly close, something was humming.